thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. My name is Karen Lanigan. I'm Head of Member Experience here within Chartered Accountants Ireland, and that also includes our Careers Advisory and Recruitment team. So we have designed this webinar specifically for newly and recently qualified members, because we understand that this is and can be a crossroads for you when you get to the stage of being qualified, and congratulations, by the way. But we do know that it is a time where you may want to take stock and think of where it is your career can take you and where you want it to take you. So we're very cognizant of that and are here very much to provide support via this webinar, but also indeed one-to-one consultations. If you want to reach out to us after the webinar, we're more than happy to have those individual conversations with you as you explore the options. For some, it may be a case of you staying working in your firm and exploring options there, both in the short and medium term. For others, it may be looking elsewhere. But irrespective of what your options and decisions are, we're here to support you in a confidential, independent and impartial way, based on the knowledge and experience myself and Dave have over the years of working with our members at various different crossroads throughout your career. Unfortunately, Dave couldn't be here with us in person, but he did record his webinar beforehand. So we're going to show that to you now, but I will be available in person myself at the end of that to take any questions or queries that you have. So I will be here to deal with those questions, and so feel free to pop those into the chat or the Q&A, and I'm more than happy to deal with those questions towards the end of the webinar. So look, once again, thank you for joining us, and I'm now going to hand over to the recording, which my colleague Chris will share with you now.
Thanks very much, Karen. Hi, everybody. Yeah, and as Karen mentioned, you're all at a very key crossroads in your career. I remember it like it was yesterday myself, I suppose, where you've qualified and you're finished with the exams and you're embarking on the next stage of really building your career. So hopefully this session can give you some key tips that I've learned along the way in terms of career advice for newly quals and recent quals. And we'll get into it just to indicate what we're going through today in terms of the objectives. So I'm going to provide a bit of an overview on the jobs market for 2023. It's pretty good so far, so we can go into that a little bit. I'll touch on salary, which is a changing kind of movable feast at the moment. We'll look at some key tips for building your career at this early stage and some things to be cognizant of. We will look at really analysing yourself, doing a bit of self-analysis, being vigilant of your personal brand and how to build that in the next few years, and then helping you maybe make some correct career choices that suit you and some key decisions that you're going to come up against in the next 2 to 3 years as your career accelerates. Treating the next few years like a real career project. We'll give you an action list and some takeaways as well. And then just looking after yourself, and that we've all come through a tough couple of years as well. So without further ado, we'll fly through it. There's quite a few slides, but we'll get through it over the next half hour or a little bit more. So the early part of 2023 for the careers team is looking quite good. We found it straight out of the blocks in January. There were a lot of roles coming in at all levels, particular demand for newly qualified Big Four and SMP, small and medium-sized practices. So the market has been very strong. When the economy is good, there's a sort of a natural move for newly quals out of practice into industry, and there's nothing new there. But as a result, I suppose practice are screaming out for good ACAs at the moment as well. There's a huge demand across the country, ROI and Northern Ireland as well. So if anyone enjoys practice, like the world is your oyster in that regard, and you'll move up through the ranks pretty quickly there. Recruitment activity is very buoyant across the board. If any of you are speaking to other recruiters, ACA recruiters, preferably, I suppose. They'll give you a sense of that as well. It's always worth having a chat with a couple of good recruiters in the market just to get a sense of things as you come up against that qualification or end of contract in the next few months. So I've mentioned practice and the huge demand across practice at the moment. Industry really good. Lots of PLCs, multinationals, and SMEs all looking for newly qualified to come in as, you know, FP&A or financial accountants, management accountants, etc. And we'll have a look at the full spectrum of different type of roles shortly. And financial services still very strong. Brexit influencing that as well, of course. And there is still kind of a hangover and an influence of companies and entities being set up in IFSC in Ireland generally. So good influence that way. So the overall picture, good start to the year, huge demand for newly quals, and looks set to stay that way as we go into the summer. Nobody has a crystal ball, of course, you know, looking into the end of this year and early next year, you just never know with some developments between, you know, Ukraine, Brexit I mentioned, COVID legacy, banking situation in the States. Fingers crossed it all stays good because it has been good over the last year. So it's worth kind of calling out some good sectors at the moment that would be notable, you know, that you need to tune into maybe as you start your job search or your job search project. So massive trends generally in the space of data, AI, huge developments actually in AI in the last couple of days, you know, between ChatGPT and its influence on the profession and various sectors. ESG sustainability, the president called out the fact that the middle of next year, it's just going to be a huge explosion on that side of the fence. The president of Chartered Accountants Ireland, Pat O'Neill, mentioned that sustainability is going to be so big for chartered accountants next year. So well worth tuning into that. Food production, energy production, the banking sector and the shifting sands in that. Fintech has been for a number of years now a really big spotlight. So if it's something that you have a grow for, you know, it's a growing area. Environmental is only going one direction as well. You know, so anything in that area, if you have an interest in that, great growth. Housing sector, again, you know, it has its ups and downs at the moment. Construction, charities is one thing we found actually that there is a big demand in for qualified ACAs, and some members really like the altruism and the idea of carving out a career in that space. So it could be an interesting one to look at. As demand increases. Tech sector and the healthcare sector, of course, both have been very strong with mixed results in recent months, of course. So we're keeping an eye on all of those. International opportunities, travel is back. Many of you will probably be heading to Australia, Canada, and further afield. We've actually got new roles in the Middle East at the moment, and London, of course, as well. So travel is really good for the early stage of your career. It gives a nice maturity, and it really enhances your CV. So if you're thinking about it, go for it. It's a great consideration. So and I've mentioned the economic outlook being good for the moment. So at least you can kind of put that in your back pocket in the knowledge that there, you know, now that you're a qualified ACA, there is a huge demand for your qualifications, and you should go into interviews with confidence, and you know, I suppose just confidence in the knowledge that you're in demand. Salary levels I touched on, they're staying strong. Inflation is really influencing this, of course. Like there's a lot of talk about salary levels going way up into the 60s, and you know, and everybody hears the stories about their ex-colleague who got 68 grand first jump into industry and stuff like that. That's really the exception more than the norm. So what would I say? Salaries typically for Big Four newly qualified going out into, say, a financial accounting role in industry would be around the 55, 58 mark typically. You know, an average would be still kind of 50 to 55 going into SMEs for like a standard accounting role. So it just depends on the organization. A lot of where we're seeing the change at the moment is in packages. So, you know, VHI, good pensions, bonuses coming into newly qual salaries as well and stuff like that. So it's the bigger picture and the overall remuneration package more so. And that's actually what I've mentioned there. And look, for a lot of recently qualified ACAs that I speak to every year, every month even, salary isn't usually top of the list. It's a real consideration as you get your career off the ground. But what should be more of a focus is, is the culture of the organization I'm looking at right? Is the role the right title to set me off in the right direction? Do I think I'm going to enjoy working with these people, and do I like the sector? So, salary is there in the mix, but probably third or fourth on the list in terms of importance. And as mentioned, inflation is kind of the key word at the moment. So just keep an eye on that. Keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with that. Salaries creeping up, but not going mad is probably the summary. So early career build considerations. Like we said, you're at that crossroads now where the books are kind of parked, exams are done, you've stuck the head above the kind of parapet, and you now need to figure out the next phase, which is building a career, and you have to figure out how to do that. So hopefully a couple of tips here will help you along the way with that. Treat it like a project. Like that's when I'm speaking to members every week at the moment, that's what I'm telling them. Like, you need to give it parameters, you need to give it a timeline. You need to set up a file, a spreadsheet, a physical file, a hub where you can record all your information. You need to allocate time to it, whether it's, with a coffee and croissant on a Friday morning at 8:00, and you give it an hour and a half where you're kind of updating all your information and figuring out where you are with the project. It's well worth building that into your week or your month even. Do your research. I always tell people as they start their career project or their job search project to take the initial few weeks and do the research. Become almost as good as a recruiter in terms of market mapping and understanding the trends and what's going on out there. Have a chat with your mentors at this point of your career. Like, we have a mentorship program in the Institute now that's working really successfully, actually, where we pair you up with CFOs or FDs or heads of IA that might be of interest for you to talk to during the year. And someone like that should be one of your mentors. It might equally, a manager or a director from your current firm that you get on really well with could be another mentor, and then someone from your close family who's a good business person and knows you extremely well could be another really good mentor. And I'd always recommend having 3 different mentors, 3 different advisors that can chat to you about where you're going with your career. And then make your own decisions, put all their thoughts and advice together and kind of come up with your own path and journey. Be deliberate as you map out your career pathway. Build it, be intentional about it, own it. Don't just float along from job application to job application and kind of, let stuff happen to you. In my experience of whatever it is, 12 years in recruitment, the people who have really succeeded in what they want from their career, and it doesn't mean they all go on and become CFOs or anything like it. Some of them just want to do particular things with the qualification. The ones who really make it in terms of their goals are the ones who are very intentional, and they put time into it and effort, and they're constantly talking to people about it, and they're really sculpting out that career. So that should become a focus for you in the years ahead. We have questionnaires and self-analysis tools that you can use that we can send on to you from the careers team. So just raise a hand at any stage and shout for those. Secondments, like if you're going to stay in practice, and sometimes that can be a really good option after qualification, staying with your practice for another 6 months as you just kind of let the dust settle after exams and just take stock, figure out the market, and even raise a hand and get a secondment out into it with a client can be a good way of getting a little bit of industry or FS experience onto your CV that can be advantageous. Life for life, like life isn't just a job, it's a piece of it. Stuff happens. You have to buy houses, you move country, you move location, family stuff and all the rest of it. So allow for life to come in on top of your job decisions, and be resilient and adjust with that as need be. And one of the more important things that we're going to touch on in a few slides is to build a network. So you're at that early stage now where you don't have to jump straight into building a network and go mad at that, but it is something that you definitely need to keep front of mind. It is Ireland after all. You are professionally qualified, and now as you do your CPD, as you do maybe a couple of other small courses, and you develop your skill set, your soft skills, and you develop other kind of aptitudes, you need to start linking with people in your sector, in your skill base, and grow that out. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. So just to give you guidance on finding a new role and the steps involved. So this is kind of it's a little bit of a step-by-step approach. Do a career audit. Have a look at what you're good at, what your bosses or the partner or managers have said to you in the past at your annual review that you're particularly good at. Get a blank piece of paper, jot that down, note it for yourself, and do that little bit of self-reflection. Be honest with yourself about what am I good at, what have I been told I'm particularly good at, and what am I not great at that I might want to upskill on. Sometimes you're better off investing a little bit more time perfecting the things you're really good at. That's where you get more of a boost rather than trying to completely fix the things you're not brilliant at. Research the market, as I said, invest time into doing that, and you won't that will save you wasting time when it comes to applications. It makes for a much more targeted job search strategy. Identify your USPs, as mentioned. So, have other people tell you what you're good at, whether it's recruiters and them being honest with you, whether it's an internal sponsor in your practice that you can sit with, who will call out the things that you're good and bad at and do a bit of a SWOT analysis with you. Start to be vigilant of your personal branding, and we'll touch on that as well. But personal branding, in summary, being the thing that people say about you when you leave the room from a professional perspective, and what you're known for. Okay. CV interview prep we're going to look at, I think, in the slides. So we'll touch on some of the salient pieces there. Networking, we've mentioned agencies, job sites, and so on. They have their place. I wouldn't be putting all my eggs in that basket, and we can go into that shortly. Just as a quick side point, there are only 3 ways to get a job, just so you're aware as your contracts kind of finish up in the next month or so. Number 1 is through a recruiter. Number 2 is warm, direct applications yourself. And number 3 is through your personal network. So if you're actively looking for a new job and you're stepping into the market in the coming months, your job search project is going to be split between those 3 mechanisms. Now, as newly qualified, the recruiters are going to be useful for you, less so as an FCA in latter years. Job sites, just to mention that, set up your alerts, get the jobs sent on to you, but I would shy away, to be perfectly honest, and I think a lot of recruiters would say this to you, I'd shy away from putting in direct applications to jobs through irishjobs.ie or through LinkedIn. I'd go away and do, as I said, the warm application. So do the homework, have a look at the website of the company, their careers page, have a look at who in HR is in charge of the role, try and get in under the bonnet in terms of understanding what's involved in the role beyond the spec, get some extra information out of HR and stuff like that, and then you're ready to put in a direct application, addressed to the person who's hiring or to the HR person. I can go into that a bit more on a one-to-one basis if anyone needs, but that's what I mean by a warm application. So I mentioned kind of your job search project, and there's a checklist that I can send on to anyone afterwards. Like, I do have an email template where I have a lot of these links, documents, and kind of other webinar pieces and the self-assessment stuff that I can send on to you if anyone wants to shout after this. I don't expect you to read that, but it is a document which has a kind of 30 key things you need to tick as complete as you're going through your job search checklist. Many of them intuitively you will know, but some will be good reminders. So typical opportunities then, and this is just a flavor of I always remember when I qualified, I literally had to start from scratch in terms of understanding where I can take the qualification, and it was only by looking at jobs boards that I figured out what kind of job titles I could apply for. And the reality is, as a qualified ACA, it's so diverse. You can go in so many different directions with the qualification. Look where I ended up, so in terms of recruitment. So this is just a small flavor of the type of roles you can jump into as a staple one. But if you're going to Australia, it could be very different in terms of terminology. And we had a young professionals meeting there recently where we had a well-known sports personality in talking about his qualification as an ACA. We had an acting coach in talking about her setting up her own acting business, and so on. You'd be amazed at some of the profiles and directions that people go and take the qualification. So the shackles are off. So just a couple of tips then, since that's the theme. Your personal brand, I've mentioned kind of start building it and so on, but the reality is that you have it, whether you recognize it or not. It follows you. You do have a personal brand, so you need to take ownership of it now and start realizing what you're known for, grow it and guard it, and foster it. Link in with ACAs. Yeah, that's a good tip, actually. Link in with ACAs that are 2 or 3 years ahead of you. They might have moved out of your training practice and gone into really interesting roles in financial services or industry. So connect in with them on LinkedIn or tap them on the shoulder and say, could I pick your brains and have a chat with them or a coffee, and flatter them by saying, you've made a fantastic move. How did you go about it? What was your strategy when you were looking at the market and making a move and so on? And again, it's good networking. I always find, and I don't know if all recruiters say the same thing about this, but my take on the first year after qualification, when you come to the end of your contract, is that you have a license to kind of roam free and try a few different things, whether that could be anything from like a maternity cover contract, or go abroad, or and do an operational kind of role or whatever. But I think you have a bit of a free play in the first year to use the qualification in whatever way you want and to try out something new. Like I had someone from Kasai actually that I placed into a technology company in a whole kind of ERP installation role, because he had a real grow for technology and loved it, and literally shot up through the ranks in that particular company, and has gone down a slightly different route with it, but it really fitted. So if you do a contract, it means if you don't like it, you're not obliged to stick with it, and you can jump out of it really quickly. So a 10 or 12 month contract can be very advantageous in that regard. Oh yeah, good point about thinking 2 moves ahead. And this is a good point for all of your career, really. If you're looking at prospects in the next few months and maybe accepting an offer, the key piece for me on that, because you're probably not going to stay in it all that long, it might be 12, 18, 24 months that you stay in the role, think about what that as a stepping stone and what it's going to do to your CV in terms of what direction it points you off in. It doesn't mean you're committed to that direction by any means, but you're going to be picking up particular soft skills and getting key new experience in that role. So what does it do and add to your CV? And it's really important to be vigilant to that. Like, what's the next role that you're going to be looking at and applying for after you do this particular role you're just about to accept? Have a look at the Career Pathway Hub on Chartered Accountants Ireland. I think we have a slide on that a little bit later. Then have a look at contracts. As I mentioned, gig economy is a key word and kind of theme at the moment globally. It's all about the gig economy, so tune into that. And one little tip: review the Accountancy Ireland back issues. If you haven't had time through studies to read them over the last year or two, well worth a browse back through those. Look at some of the key topics, the movers, the shakers, what's been happening in various different industries. It can be it's a real Bible, I think, for the profession. So it's Ireland's top business publication. So well worth keeping all your back issues. Do a career audit, as we call out. Not to labour this, but do a self-analysis down by the fire with a blank piece of paper and do a mind map for yourself. Plot out your route, the cliched 5-year goal. Try as best you can to kind of crystal ball where you think your career is going to be in the next 5 years or 10 years even, and work back from that. So if you want to be a CFO in 10 years time, where do you need to be in 5 years time? And then how does that colour the decisions you make in terms of offer and acceptance on jobs in the next 2 or 3 years? Does it all look like it stacks up? Again, you have to be flexible and adaptable and move with things when they change, but it's always good to have a bit of a template. Career audit really means your strengths, just a bit of the SWOT analysis, and what's going to decide you accepting an offer. Is a role going to give you some key skills that you can pick up? Is it going to tick the box in terms of people management that you're missing, or is it going to expose you to an ERP like SAP, or is it going to give you a corporate experience that you haven't had to date, etc.? So have a look at what it's going to add to your journey. And do have a look at the things that you've enjoyed all the way through maybe practice, or if you trained through industry, what did you enjoy, what did you dislike? Bank those and be cognizant of them as you move on in your career. Build a career plan. Yeah, kind of same point, try and envision the next 10 years and then the next 5 years, because that'll set the 5-year mark. There's a couple of pinch points, and the career pathway will call this out for you with a graphic. So the 2-3 years PQE mark is a significant one. Then after that, maybe the 5-6 years PQE is another little bit of a stepping stone. And then as you get into 10 years PQE and your FCA kind of level, you're really into the meat of your career at that point, and you're settling in. So before you find yourself in something you never really envisioned, try to plan it out and be aware of that. And that means being honest with yourself in terms of what you're good at, what you're not great at, and playing to your strengths, basically. Do speak to mentors, as I mentioned, and your peers. Chat to people you used to work with all the time. Stay in touch with them, pick their brains, make a point of having coffees with them regularly, and so on. Write down your plan. It's more likely to transpire if you put it in your folder, stick it in your spreadsheet, and actively make it a living kind of written down plan and document. Start building your brand, we've touched on, and giving time over to the career project we've kind of touched on. Research the market. If you are stepping out into job search at the moment, don't kind of float around from recruiter to recruiter and random applications and stuff like that. Do the research, know your sectors, know the value add that you're bringing to any prospective employer. Part of that'll feed into your interview prep as well, in terms of knowing your own strengths, your key achievements, and your value add. Scan the job sites and LinkedIn alerts we've touched on as well. Setting up your alerts on the job sites, for financial accountant or FP&A analyst or whatever kind of title you want to put in there, and getting all those jobs sent to you will give you a very quick snapshot of the market, and it's a great way of doing research and getting up to speed in terms of who's employing, who's hiring, what types of companies are hiring, what they're looking for, and what sectors are doing well, and so on. So we've touched on that a little bit in terms of sectors that are going well. Stay in touch with the news, be proactive, as mentioned. Yeah, LinkedIn is an obvious kind of side project. And it's it's less challenging for you guys than for FCAs who are still kind of coming fresh to it at this stage. It's key, your profile is important. The keywords you use in that are really important because they will kind of call out where you want to go with your career. So the keywords that you use in your profile should really echo the job that you want to get in the next kind of phase of your career. Make sure your photo is really professional. If you still have the graduate kind of cap and gown photo up there, scrap it. Get a new professional photo to match your new stage of career. John Murray does an awful lot of our. I think it's headshots is his business. He's excellent. Highly recommend. Make sure your qualification. It still might surprise me when I see qualified ACAs who haven't joined the Chartered Accountants Ireland group, or they haven't put the logo up and affiliated themselves with ICAI and so on. So make sure you've got your profile 100% and fleshed out with lots of detail in there, showcasing your key achievements, keywords as mentioned, and I have a document on LinkedIn if anyone needs to shout and get that off me. Join lots and lots of groups, everything from internal audit groups to sustainability groups to all the institutes. There's about 5 or 6 different institute groups, Lens Society, etc. Be active, comment, like the usual kind of business social media activity. And if that means, with your coffee and croissant on a Friday morning that you're jumping into LinkedIn and doing a little bit of connecting with people, you're being particular and strategic about who you decide you want to connect with. And making short lists every week of maybe 10 people this week that you want to connect in with because they're in a particular sector and they're CFO or FD. That's brilliant. Follow companies. You can actually click on the follow button, connect, share, and post. All the obvious stuff that most of you will know already, but put time into it. Invest in your network. Yeah, it's a key message, really. And I like the phrase networking is the spine of a successful career, because it really is. It's only going to get more and more important for you as you go down through your years of PQE. So just to call that out now and make sure you start that off. It will be, as I said, for FCAs, I'd say 80% of the time, that's how they get the big move in their career. It's through their connections and their networking, and the cup of coffee meet and the little bit of tap on the shoulder and headhunt. But you have to put in the groundwork in the early years of your career and just be cognizant of it. It doesn't have to be contrived. You can just kind of make sure you stay in touch with people and you're constantly chatting to people and staying in touch, and then when it comes to tapping them on the shoulder and sort of picking their brains, it's nice and easy. How do I do it? Sometimes it can be difficult. The LinkedIn stuff is obvious, but equally staying in touch with ex-colleagues, reconnect with them, not asking for referrals, but if someone knows you and knows you're really good, they're more inclined to sort of say, do you know who you should talk to? Actually, my brother-in-law just set up a new company. He'd love to actually have a chat with someone like you. So lots of little kind of touch points and connections like that are really important. Keep picking people's brains, social media, your visibility. The one thing I didn't say about LinkedIn there is that it really is your personal, it's your personal brand in a way. It's your online profile. It's the key is to get yourself visible by raising that, so it does take a little bit of work that way. And events, look, one tip, I always take a quick snapshot of the attendee list of people at events, and I make a point of connecting in with them, DMing them after, say, sorry, I didn't get chatting to you at the event, but great to connect and stuff like that. So lists of attendees and stuff can be very useful. Join the groups, get involved with the institute. I mentioned there the young professionals, the Leinster Society. Now that the books are parked, it's a real opportunity for you to get more involved with the institute. There's always an inclination to kind of take a step back and run away from the logo a little bit, if you associate it with exams and stuff. But now is the opportunity and the crossroads that you can really leverage the weight of the institute, as a fully qualified member now, I'd highly recommend getting involved with, say, the charities group, or there's so many different committees and stuff that you can get involved with, and to boost your brand. That's the key piece, and get more visible. I'll fly through this because, if any of you get an offer and you want to use the careers team as a sounding board, you're not sure about any part of the process really in terms of the job search. We're not an agency, we're here for members only. So use this as a sounding board to sense check anything, whether it's an offer you're not really sure about or interview preparation or anything like that. Just give us a shout, and we're here for you. But don't jump at offers just because they come to you. Do weigh up and see if it's the right stepping stone, and it adds the right skill set. Do you like the people you're going to be working with? Does it look like feel like the right picture? What's your gut telling you is an important piece really as well. As I said, you're in demand, so it doesn't mean you have to accept the first offer when it comes along. And some of those are key salient points. Cognizant of time now, so fly through the last few. This is the career pathway that I mentioned, and it's well worth a 10-minute scan. There's some really good paragraphs in that page detailing out each phase and the things you might want to be aware of in terms of the skill sets you pick up along the way as you go through your journey or life cycle as an ACA into FCA years. It'll help you identify the upskills you need. It'll influence the CPD or maybe some small courses that you do, and so on. And then as we come towards the end, like I called out at the early stages about life coming in on top of your job, very important that, we've all been through two tough years. Hopefully the next 10 or more are plain sailing. But we have CA support is always there in the institute to have a chat if needed at any stage. And you can see there what Dee and Francesca go through, and Thrive as well. So don't be shy about contacting them if you need any kind of guidance. The careers team equally, like I mentioned there, we're a sounding board, for any stage of your career search, whether it's, a cold pivot in terms of your career at any stage, or if you need interview prep, if you want guidance on your CV, in terms of what a good CV looks like and a template to be sent out to your review of your CV, etc. Just get in touch. And yeah, I think this is the final slide. So really just to kind of summarize, you have an opportunity now to kind of take stock and plan, and gain insight into the direction you want to go with your career. So don't take that lightly. Put some time into it, chat to loads of people, make sure your CV is well sculpted. You might have a few different versions of it. Start building your brand. Be interview ready. Every interview is completely different. Every interview needs a bespoke preparation for it, no matter what type. It can be anything from a panel of very formal competency-based interviews right through to a cup of coffee in a hotel lobby where it's an informal chat and, see if there's mutual agreement on the role. So, spend that time now, become an expert on the market with your market mapping. And some key things for me, I was trying to brainstorm like what would be the final kind of messaging for me now that you're across the line, fully qualified. And there's probably about 4 really important ones for me. So I would say, and I meet ACAs and amazing FCAs every week that sometimes kind of lack a little bit of confidence, and their confidence has been knocked. And I have to actually amazingly remind them that they are fully qualified professional chartered accountants. Like, they have a unique skill set, and you're straight out of the blocks now with this qualification, with all of this incredible value add for so many employers. And really, if you're going to interviews, you should be going in with shoulders back, really confident in the knowledge that you're in demand and that you have massive value add to any finance division or audit division. So you can bank that. Mentors I've mentioned, but just to reiterate it, and to be constantly chatting to people, chatting to your mentors and your peers. But the mentor piece is really important and very useful. And do get in touch with us if you need to be linked up with someone who's on the path that you want to walk. Last two, then, take the temperature of the market constantly. Stay in tune with it. So the most amazing members that I've seen down through the years aren't the ones necessarily who have been placed in their exams in the top 10 or whatever. They're the ones who are constantly talking to people and keeping an eye on what's the shifting sands in the market and what's happening in their sector and so on. And they get ahead by knowing what's happening through the grapevine. So stay in tune. And the last one then is to build a habit of updating your career project file with new data and pivoting plans, I suppose, and updating your plans. So if you build that habit, like, you can't lose. So that's everything. As I said, if you want to get in touch with the careers team at any stage, we're there for you for any of the above mentioned services. The very best of luck with the next steps of your career. And back to Karen now for some final points. Thanks a million, guys.
Thanks so much to Dave for that. So lots of really good tips in there, and obviously Dave's bringing those tips and advice to you based on his vast experience working here with us in the Institute for almost 5 years now, supporting members, but also previous to that, he did work in the recruitment industry. And not only that, as he's mentioned, he is a member himself who has obviously managed his own career path and taken different, I suppose, steps and different pathways throughout his career, and obviously there are learnings from that. I'm more than happy to take any questions that anybody has if you'd like to put those in the chat. Obviously we will share the slides and also the link to the recording with you afterwards. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can just email careers@charteredaccountants.ie, and we'll happily deal with any queries. So careers@charteredaccountants.ie. So one of the questions that has come through here now is, does the Institute offer a CV prep service? And the comment then is, it can be difficult to know exactly what an employer looks for in a CV. And you're absolutely right. It can be really difficult to know what an employer is looking for specifically in a CV. And that can differ from organisation to organisation, and obviously from role to role as well, because there are some areas where the employer is going to be looking at your CV from a technical perspective and your experience. There's going to be other scenarios and situations where they look at the CV more through a competency lens, because there are specific competencies, wider competencies that they're looking for. So luckily, yes, we do have a CV preparation service here within the Institute that we can give you guidance and support in relation to your CV. But we're happy to review the CV and give you independent guidance and advice in relation to how you would best position yourself, making sure that obviously you're putting your best foot forward and that you're tailoring your CV to the specific areas of the types of roles that you're applying for. And we do this on a daily basis, because we're contacted by members who are applying for specific roles and ask us just to cast an eye over the CV and give advice and feedback. So more than happy to do that. We also have an interview preparation service. So if you're preparing for a specific interview and you really want to make sure that your CV is going to hit, or that you're going to hit the mark in the interview, we can certainly help you with that as well. So there is that support there on an individual basis. We also help with other applications as well. So for example, if you're applying for roles within the public sector or within the educational sector, there can be quite a detailed process around that. So essentially, we're here to support you in terms of CV and interview preparation. So please feel free to reach out to us, as well as what Dave said was in terms of, you know, career coaching guidance. We can do those sessions either online or face to face. So more than happy. So as I said, the email address is careers@charteredaccountant.ie. Feel free to reach out to us. So I'll stay on just for another few moments, see if there are any further questions. And just while I do that, like as Dave mentioned, the market is very strong and we're seeing good demand. So, you know, it's good to be operating in that backdrop. Similarly, employers are being very supportive in terms of retaining staff, you know, providing additional training, support, and opportunities for development. So, you know, irrespective of whether you decide to stay or move on, it's a great, you know, backdrop in which to be making those career decisions. But I think the key thing is not to rush into anything. Take your time, explore your options, and I think that's one of the key messages that Dave wanted to get across, and also that, you know, we are here to help and support you. We'll give it another moment, and then if there aren't any further questions, then we'll sign off. But as I said, feel free to reach out to myself or Dave by email, or indeed you can also check out our website for the details of the services which have just come up there. Feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're always happy to connect with members online as well. So thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed it and found the webinar beneficial. We also look forward to seeing you at some of the young professionals events coming up. So just keep an eye out on your emails and on our website. So I really do think, as back to what Dave was saying in terms of networking, it can be not only fun but also a good way to build out your network. So listen, thanks again, and thank you for joining us.